Wherever you are in the world, migration is likely to be a hot topic. The influx into a country, region, or even city of people from other nations or cultures can cause anxiety, distrust, and resentment in the communities where migrants choose to settle. And the outflow of the educated and the young to other regions or countries in search of better lives can have serious consequences for the homeland that they leave behind. And being that new arrival in a strange place is always challenging. Overcoming language barriers, bridging cultural gaps, learning new rules, both written and unwritten, and just trying to fit in can be an exhausting and often isolating experience. But whatever your views on the current politics of migration, there can be little doubt that the movement of people is far from a new phenomenon. And the world as we know it today would, culturally, be a much poorer place if there had not been constant movement of individuals and groups of people between countries and cultures throughout history. Our languages, religion, food, music, art, attitudes, ideas and customs have been shaped and enriched by the mixing of cultures brought about through migration. And ultimately, migration is the sum total of millions of individual experiences. And migrants who have returned home often have unique perspectives on the similarities and differences between our cultures and what we can learn from each other.
I moved to China for a job and I lived there for about 4 years. In general, I had a very good experience. I would say that my two main challenges were learning Mandarin and dealing with people's expectations of me. Most people obviously thought that I was from China. And so they would just make natural assumptions. They would, start speaking to me in Mandarin or and things like that. So loads and loads of times I had to keep saying to people, no, I'm not from China, I'm from Britain. In terms of learning Mandarin, it was very difficult because it's a tonal language. And if you don't get the exact tone, you could be saying something completely different. So sometimes, for example, or often when I was speaking to taxi drivers and I would say my address, they wouldn't understand me because of the tone. So I would have to keep adjusting my tone all the time. And so sometimes it would take at least 4 attempts to get my address right. In the end, though, I decided that the easiest thing to do would be to carry my address around with me, written in Chinese characters, so that I could just show it to the taxi driver. The other thing, of course, about Mandarin was, of course, reading and writing it. I couldn't read or write it, even though my parents, who are from Hong Kong, tried to teach me when I was very young. And that is one of my regrets, or that was one of my regrets when I was living in China. I kind of thought to myself a few times, I wish I'd paid more attention when I was younger, when my parents were trying to teach me.
I've lived in Turkey. I've lived in Colombia, in Bogota, the capital, and I've also lived in Kazakhstan as well. So I suppose different regions completely geographically. But I don't think that really changed the people that were there. One thing I found was actually inherently all people, they're all the same. I don't want to make that sound very general, but their values are very similar. Their approach to life is very similar. How they work within their family is very, very similar. Small things, maybe how they do things on a day-to-day basis, foods that they eat, what they do within a family, what their typical Friday night is, what their typical evening activities are, may of course differ, but inherently I think they're actually really similar. When I was in Turkey, my push was always to mix as much as possible with local people. I found I learned a lot more, I integrated a lot better, and actually that was the best way to pick up the language. So within 2 years in Turkey, for example, I was actually able to translate documents for colleagues from Turkish to English and vice versa. One thing I found in Turkey, it doesn't matter when you're working, when you're free, it's important to sit down at least once a day as a family together and eat the same thing. So not one person has to have their diet, the other person has their diet. It's a collective, something communal, which I really believe brings the families together. And that's something that I insist now when I'm sitting with my family as well.
Moving to Brazil, it was again a complete culture shock, but the weather was incredible. People were very friendly and the food was amazing, and I lived by the beach. It was like I'd landed in heaven, and I just didn't know how it happened. And because I had Spanish, Portuguese was a little bit easier. It was more accessible. I could kind of get by. And I just loved every minute of being in Brazil. I just loved the food, the lifestyle, the people, and it was an amazing experience. I think in Brazil what you learn to do is you learn to value the things that are good in your life right now. There's a lot of poverty in Brazil. And what I learned is you'd look out the window sometimes and people are playing music in the street and you see people dancing, and they haven't got a lot, but they were just enjoying the moment. So I guess for me, one of the biggest things that I learned is you've just got to enjoy the moment and seize it.
Some people who migrate never return to live in their homeland. What is the experience like for them?
I moved to the UK in 2000, so about 15 years ago, from India. I was born and bred in South India in a place called Kerala, lovely place. I came here to do my degree, and my grandmother lived on her own here, so to live with her as well. When I was doing my degree, the first year or so, when you're sort of integrating yourself and learning more about the culture and all that, trying to understand the accents, I did feel a little bit foreign because in my first assignment, I did law degree, first assignment was to watch a trial in a courtroom, and the guy had an Irish accent and I had to take notes. I came back with a blank page and I was like, I don't have anything. I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Indian culture is very conservative in the sense that you don't have as much freedom of expression. Everything is set in their ways and there is a certain path you follow. So you go to school, you go to university, you get a degree, you get a job, then you do your master's, then it's all like that's the way it is. Most people do, and you kind of tend to fall into it. Whereas what I found here was people were not afraid to choose a slightly different path. Okay, what if I don't do a degree? Doesn't matter. I can go and work for 5 years and then go back into education, say 15 years later. It doesn't matter when you do it. When I came to do my degree, my plan was always to go back in 4 years' time and, get a good job and settle where my parents are, because they were back in India. And then I got married after a while. Not straight after, that would not be good. I got a job here in London, so I started working, and then I met somebody, and then he happened to be from here, and we got married, and the rest is history now. It's very hard when you're living in a different country, and if you have a different set of values and culture you grew up with, to keep it intact, it's very difficult. But I do strive to do that in terms of, like, in Indian culture, the family structure is very important. I'm sure family is important for everyone, but when your parents age, it's considered your responsibility to look after them. And I think that's a nice sort of thing to keep. And there are elements like that that I do miss sometimes. I don't get to do as much as I would like to. But I do, as much as I can, I try to think about it in my everyday actions and try to sort of bring it into my life. I do still think of India as home. I think that's because 16 years is a long time, and where you grew up, where you have your childhood, all that kind of comes to be the home. So I do think of it as home, although if I'm away from here for more than 2 weeks, I get homesick. So I can say I have two homes, maybe.
For me, it's interesting because I was born in England and my mother was Irish, so she did exactly what I'm doing now, in that she moved to England in 1984, always intended to move back, but didn't move back until 1997, so stayed there for quite a long time, but did make the move back. Personally, I always imagined that I'd move back. It's home, I suppose. But the reason I moved was mainly economic. It's very difficult to get the kind of job I have now in Ireland. So the reality is that Ireland can't offer the same variety that a bigger country can offer. And no matter how economically successful it is, that will always be the case. It's a country of 4.5 million people. Emigration is a part of Irish culture. It's in our literature, in our famous songs, and it's something people talk about a lot. There's a famous quote about, no longer shall our children be raised like our cattle for export. That's a paraphrase. But that is essentially what's happened for the last century at least. Yeah, being Irish is a strange one because it's a small country that has a big brand. A lot of people know something about Ireland, even if they know very little about the actual country. The first thing you'll hear is usually the Irish pub. Then you might hear something about singing. And then you might hear footballers like Roy Keane or Robbie Keane. So when an Irish person goes abroad, they're usually met with this brand, and in a way it's a good thing. People tend to warm to you quickly, but that can also be difficult because people have a cartoonish view of Ireland which has little or nothing to do with the reality. So often you have to break through the cartoon-like identity to actually communicate what being Irish is.